Hello and welcome to the TT Podcast. This is the podcast where we talk to one person from the world of the TT racers to discuss their lives, their journeys, their ambitions and their relationship with the world's greatest motorsporting event on the Isle of Man. I'm Chris Pritchard and with me is Steve Plater. Steve, good morning.
Hey mate, how you doing?
I'm good, are you?
Yeah, pretty good. Looking forward to this one. You know, it's nice to get a youngster in, and in all fairness, mate, looking at his date of birth, I feel quite ashamed.
He was born just after you started racing.
All right.
We'll get on to that. But this guy is a real talent. He's an exciting prospect to carry the legacy of the TT on for quite a while. He's exploded on the scene and already turned a few heads.
Yeah, we need more riders like him, in all fairness. You know, he's had a couple of good TTs. He's shining in other events as well and riding really well, and without doubt one of the bright prospects of the future.
Let's get into it. In today's episode of the TT Podcast, we are joined by Davey Todd. It's fair to say in his short TT career to date, he's made quite an impression. Debuting in 2018, he claims that he's taken his first 2 TTs fairly steadily. But after becoming the second fastest ever newcomer and then taking a host of top 10 finishes a year later, he is widely regarded as road racing's hottest property. Ooh. In fact, his results were enough to catch the attention of the biggest names in the paddock. At only 24 and still a relative newbie, he was snapped up by Honda Racing for the 2020 TT campaign as a factory rider. Then obviously coronavirus came along. Initially, Honda retained his services for the short circuit series, but when the TT was cancelled for a second year in 2021, his contract wasn't renewed and he was back to square one. While the upward trajectory of his career may have been paused by the effects of the pandemic, as one of the sport's rising stars, it is surely only a temporary setback. Davey Todd, what an intro for someone who's brand new to the TT, really. How are you, mate? You all right?
Yeah, all good, mate. It sounds pretty special, that, doesn't it?
Second ever fastest newcomer to the TT. That's... Are you happy with that, or would you have liked to have been the fastest ever?
No, to be honest, that always feels like a kick in the teeth, and all my mates and stuff around me use it as a bit of a dig that it's second best. But yeah, no, it's pretty cool to be second best still to the fastest guy around there in the world right now. So
yeah, second behind Peter. I'll take second behind Peter Aikman in anything, let alone the TT.
Yeah, I've got my excuses, to be honest. I've got my excuses, a red flag, but I don't want to go down that road. But no, it was good. It was good. Hooked from that moment on.
Now, I said to you when you came in, you know, 2 years you've been doing the TT, doing a sterling job, but you're a rock star already. You've been flipping. You're making us wait for you this morning.
Yeah, not on purpose. I think, again, anybody who knows me knows I'm quite often late. It's a curse.
Saltburn-on-Sea, where the flipping heck's that?
It's by the sea, isn't it?
It's unreal little place. You can't get me away from there. In between Middlesbrough and Whitby, northeast coast.
1995. I know you've been taking the mickey a little bit. 1990. I started racing in I can see it here on some notes. I started racing in 1994. You're trying to make me feel old.
Mate, I'm starting to feel old now. You know, it's these 2 years off is just, I feel like I've aged a lot. You know, it's been a mad couple of years, and yeah, honestly, I feel old now. I don't feel like this young kid anymore.
So, Davey, one question that every TT racer gets asked on this podcast: you're rolling up to the start line, visors down, you're clicking the bike into first gear, you're waiting for that tap on the shoulder to set off down Bray Hill. What's going through your mind at that moment?
Coming up to the start line, I think, is where all the nerves are. And as soon as I feel like I'm the one bike before the start line, the nerves disappear from then, because then you're just focused on what you've got in front of you, and it all goes like, I guess you go into that zone of just thinking about the job at hand and what you've got in front of you. So the nerves from that point go away, and then you roll the bike forward onto the front row, I guess, and yeah, you get your tap on your shoulder, and it's just like, yeah, massive, the biggest rush of adrenaline I think that you could possibly get on any bike or doing anything, to be honest. It's a lot of excitement, but yeah, it's hard to even explain. It's just that much focus. you don't know what you're actually thinking about. You're just thinking about the corners in front of you, thinking about going over the top of St. Ninians and down Bray Hill like flat out in sixth gear. It's just goes. It's crazy how it works. Where you don't get like warm-up laps and you're not sat on the grid and stuff like that with other riders. It's one at a time, and you literally go from a standstill to flat out in top gear straight away.
Well, that's it. You short circuits, you get that warm-up lap, you get to form on the grid, you're waiting for that red light. But with this, like you said, there's no morning warm-up, so you don't even get your brain up to speed. You have to get your brain up to speed within, what you're doing, 160 over St. Ninians?
Yeah,
like
probably
that.
160, maybe 180, or for sure 180, 190 down Bray Hill. It's just absolutely flat, like on a big bike. And yeah, going from zero to that is it's an eye opener, when you first do it. But
and do you think the fact that at TT 2022 you're going to have a morning warm up this time, do you think that's going to change how the races run from you personally, or do you feel like regardless of whether you have that, you can get yourself up to speed instantly?
No, I think it'd be a lot better. I think it'd be a ton better for riders that having the warm up, and you can get you into that headspace, because jumping on a bike, having not sat on it all day, and then going straight to 180, 200 mile an hour within the first 30 seconds, the first minute of a race is nuts. It's absolutely insane. So getting yourself warmed up a little bit is definitely a good thing. And
that the first time you go over St. Ninians at like 180, the second time you come round, does it feel as fast? Like, does it take a while to get that brain up to speed? So then when you come over second lap, third lap, you're into the groove, and it doesn't feel as scary.
Yeah, definitely. I think certainly it slows down after the first few miles. Everything starts to slow down a little bit and not feel so hectic and like there's a lot going on. And the funny thing is, the next lap when you come over, it's on a flying lap, and you're actually going over there quicker because you've had a run up over the start finish line. But yeah, it all starts to slow down, and everything in your mind, it's weird. Everybody watches the videos and everything and asks how like you can even focus. Actually, it's crazy for me when I sit at home and watch an onboard video, and you can't understand like how your brain can focus like doing that. But when you're actually riding yourself, everything really does go in slow motion. Everything slows down, and you just know what you're doing all the time, 2 steps ahead of where you are on the road every second of the way.
You see, I can't get my breath. TT22 morning warm-ups, you got it so easy these days. Back in my day, there was no messing around, no warm-up, straight in like Flynn. You had to be on podium pace, immediately. It really was. But no, hey, some people have come for that and some aren't. It used to take me probably 3 miles to Union Mills to get at ease, not just with myself, my body, my mind, but obviously get everything warmed up on the bike and to knuckle down. Yeah,
to be honest, I've not always been too bad at it, to be honest, but it's always been a learning curve. Every TT I've done so far, I never feel like at any point I've been pushing. I wanted to go there for my first couple of years and make sure I was just taking it easy. One of the best things I ever got told by John Burrows, who I rode for in my first year, he just said, treat it like a Sunday ride. Every time you go out, he said, we were sat on the start line for my first ever race, a Superbike race. And he said, just treat it like a Sunday ride. Just go out and enjoy getting to ride around the best circuit in the world. And that's literally what I did, and came in and you're like, wow, the lap time was actually pretty good. Like, I just keep doing this, and that's all I've kept doing, and the lap time just keeps getting better. So I wanted to do that until I feel completely comfortable around there. And
let's rewind the clock, back to your early days and getting into not just riding 2 wheels to begin with. I know you're a big Supermoto man, and our man here, Chris Pritchard, he kind of blows a bit of smoke up his own backside, saying he was probably better than you.
He keeps telling me that. Yeah, he keeps telling me.
I beat James Ellison. What more do you want?
Who?
Wow. I remember seeing David Jeffries once in a race. I saw him at the start and I saw him at the end, but in between I didn't see much of him.
So what got you into 2 wheels? Did your father race? Your parents massive into it? What was your kind of inroad in?
Yeah, so my dad had bikes his whole life, and he was always into bikes and racing, but he never actually raced himself. But yeah, it was just that natural thing. All I remember from early years before I rode, like, first years of my life, was watching racing on TV. That's literally all that happened. My dad had it on all the time, whether it was motocross or MotoGP or Superbikes, anything. There was always something on racing-wise, two-wheeled motorsport on TV. So it's all I wanted to do. And, my dad got me a bike, I think, for Christmas when I was 3 years old, and just was mad about it straight away, and like wanted to ride every second, every day. And to be honest, nothing's changed. 23 years later, and nothing's any different at all. So from then on, just rode as much as possible, and would take me to motocross practice tracks. And the legal age, at 6 years old, you can start racing motocross. I started racing and just went from there, and was always competitive. So, wasn't ever really out there to just take part, and always wanted to win, always wanted to do better. There was a funny year that we still joke about in my family now. I think I was only on a 50cc bike, so I was no older than like 8 years old or something, and I'd had a few races in a row where I'd come third, and I knew I could do better. I knew I could be like first or second, and I'd finish third again. And your mum and dad being your mum and dad, they were never pushy parents, and that's part of what why I think I still love racing so much now. But they were never pushy and always supportive, and they come in and they were like, "You've done well, like why are you annoyed with third place?" And I was really angry and said I'd rather finish fourth than third, which like I don't know why I was thinking, but I meant it at the time. I was just frustrated, but they were always supportive. No matter what, I come back in. I never had from my dad. I could have finished last, and my parents would have been supportive with it. I think they'd have probably not emptied the bank account so much if I'd have been finishing last. But yeah, they were supportive no matter what, and never pushed me like you see a lot of parents do. Yeah. And then when the kid gets a little bit older, they realise they find other things, and they don't want to go racing anymore. And I genuinely love it as much today, if not more, if that's possible.
So was the idea to stay in motocross? At what point did you kind of start looking? Because a lot of people do that. You kind of go through the schoolboy motocross scene, and then I don't know, either there's a bit more money in it, or it's a bit more lucrative to go across to road racing. Was that ever in your kind of like trajectory that you wanted to go and do straight over to road racing, or were you happy with motocross?
Yeah, well, honestly, I get asked the question all the time.
Sorry.
People, in the sense of like, people like say you must have dreamed of racing the Isle of Man TT your whole life. Yeah, TT, the biggest bike race, arguably the biggest bike race in the world. You must have dreamed of that your whole life. And like, honestly, no, I didn't, because I almost didn't know there was any other form of racing. I mean, I remember as a kid watching MotoGP on TV, but I was motocross through and through, and off-road, and I had it in my mind that I was going to race motocross as my career, and that's what I always aim for. And motocross being motocross, as it happens with a lot of riders, you do it through the schoolboy years, and even through that, even as a kid, you have so many injuries. And I still remember getting into like secondary school, and even after into working after school, and people telling me they've never broke a bone, and you're like, how is that possible? Like, I think by like 10 years old it was in like double figures, and you're like, how is it possible that you haven't? It's just a normal thing. Yeah, I broke my arm this week, but I'll be back racing next week or something,
All being funded by your parents at the time?
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. Like, you have the odd tiny little help here and there, but yeah, my parents genuinely put everything that they could. I'm not from a rich background, as you see, like, to be honest, a lot in sports bike racing and BSB and stuff. My parents definitely aren't rich by any stretch. I remember my dad working like every bit of overtime possible as a kid racing motocross, and on multiple occasions he'd have to leave me at the motocross track because he'd be on call over a weekend because he knew he could earn extra money. So he'd be on call and we'd be at a race and he'd be like, I'm going to have to leave you here. I'll leave you with some of our friends or your mate's dad or something. I've got to go do a job and then I'll come back and pick you up later.
That's dedication, isn't it?
And this, like, you know, I might be 8 years old, 7 years old or something. But they literally did whatever they could to make it possible for me. And I think it helped that, yeah, I was doing well the whole time. But, yeah, they didn't have to do that. And it got to a stage, you get a little bit older. And my dad, as I say, my dad always had bikes. And he'd end up selling his bike and he got a worse bike. And then he was like, I can have this bike, or I can... You're getting, you know, pushing on now, and you may be battling with someone, but they've got a really trick-tuned bike, and yours is just standard and maybe a year or two old. And so he's like, I'm going to have to sell my bike and we'll get your bike tuned, and if that's what we got to do. And he did. He sacrificed bikes for a lot of his life, you know, a lot of my life. My dad never had a bike. I remember him having one when I was young, but after that, my racing, I guess, got too expensive and he couldn't afford to have a bike.
It's that
himself.
picture again, he's priority.
Yeah. Yeah, the diva.
So what was the crossover, mate? You know, from obviously from the dirt, from the knobbly tyres to treaded tyres for the circuits. How did that happen?
So weirdly, it was through the thing that's genuinely like I would say the thing I'm most interested in, like in terms of watching, is Supercross. Like growing up watching McGrath, Supercross was the thing I absolutely love it. I still do now. I went to race a British Supercross Championship, which it was British Supercross, and it's arena cross.
Arena cross, yeah.
They call it arena cross, but they called it Supercross then. And I went to do that anyway. One winter, I'm trying to think, maybe 2011 something, 12. Went to race that. I just jumped on a 250F, like younger than I should have been. I was always like quite tall for my age. Jumped on that and ended up in one of the qualifying races anyway. Didn't even make the night show, and it was round one, which makes it even worse. But round one, qualifying race, come up short on the finish line triple jump, and shattered my tib and fib in my leg to a lot of pieces. You know, the surgeon later said it was like you could have compared it to dropping a vase. Like there's just bits everywhere.
Really?
Like it's completely annihilated. So that required a big surgery. It's full of a lot of metal, still is now. And at that point he said, you know, if it's so serious, if you go back to motocross when you can walk, and I was almost 6 months before walking.
So how old are you at this time again?
I was like 13.
Really?
Nah, 14, 15 years old. Yeah, that time they're like, yeah, if you break this again, like in the next year or two,
we're chopping it off.
You might never walk again.
Yeah.
You know, this is going to be bad. They might end up cutting it off. It might be like, it'll all be fused. Like, it won't be good. You might never walk properly again. It was a bit of a concern that I wasn't going to with the injury that I already had. So at that stage, then everybody's like, oh, what are you going to do now? You're not racing. I'm like, I'm not going to not race. I need to do something. And a few of my friends at the time from motocross had actually moved over to Supermoto. And you think, well, it's motocross bikes. You just need a couple of bits. You need a set of wheels and that's it. Or so you thought at the time anyway. A set of wheels and...
just for the viewers, obviously Supermoto is a little bit of off-road and bit of tarmac on a motocross bike with like a treaded tyre.
Yeah, the easiest way to describe it's rallycross for bikes. You know, 70% tarmac, 30% off-road and jumps and stuff. On a slick tyre basically, on a motocross bike, slick tyres. But so yeah, that was the progression. We seen a couple of our friends do it and
saw me do it, inspired him.
Seen my hero at the time, Fridge. Something like that. And
Thanks,
yeah, moved across to that for a few years and got really into Supermoto. I had a couple of sponsors on, and still my parents were helping me a lot. You know, at that time I was just finishing school. I had a job. I was working like all the hours I could in Subway as a sandwich artist. That's the official job title, honestly.
What an artist.
Put you through a qualification. It's called the University of Subway. I'm not lying.
Someone's got to make the sandwiches.
I'm hungry.
And that and that was it. You know, I did what I could about finishing school, and yeah, still wanted to keep progressing. My dad did what he could and sold up my 2 motorbikes that I had at the time, and took all the sponsors I possibly could from Supermoto over to sports bikes, and just was like, I don't really know how it works or what to do. You know, my whole life I've been putting my foot out. What you meant to like hang off the bike and put your knee out, like, and it was like, I'll just get used to it. We'll just enter into the Thundersport Championship, and I had actually entered into the like top 600, the Elite 600 Championship. And
in your first year?
In my first year. But I had to wear a novice bib because obviously until you've done your 10 race meetings, you're a novice rider. Mm-hmm. And Thundersport actually come back to me, Bernadette, who runs Thundersport, and said, you can't race the Elite Championship. You're a novice. You need to be in the pre-national championship. And I was like, I'll learn, you know, I'll get up to speed. And she was like, no, you can't. We're telling you you're not allowed to go in this championship. You know, this is just before, or basically just at round 1. You can't race in it. So I'm like, I went away, had actually read all the rules, and there was no rule in the regulations to say that a novice rider couldn't race in the Elite Championship. So I went back and said, there's no rule. Said, there is no rule, but we just strongly recommend that you don't go in that championship. It's not going to be safe. And long story short, the first round was the only round that I wasn't on the podium.
Really?
I was like 20th in maybe my first race, then 12th in the second race, and 6th in the third race, and this is all at round 1. And then from then on, I think I was in the podium in every race, won a bunch of races, and ended up winning the championship in my first year.
So she was more worried about the other riders?
I think so. Yeah. I don't know. I think I was pretty surprised too, you know, after. It's a bit of a shock when you first get there and you're like, right, I'm in 30th in the first session. Maybe I don't know how to ride, you know, it's a bit. But I've always done best with doing it in that method in all forms of my career, you know, jumping in at the deep end. With the enduro, we did the same. With the motocross, we'd always do the same. Move up a year early. And I remember a year actually forging my birth certificate. I think it was for enduro.
I've never done that.
Maybe for motocross, but the thing is, everybody does that to say they're younger than they actually are. Like all the kids were doing
like
that
Steve.
to stay in the easier class, or like the younger class a year longer so they could win it. And we actually forged it so I could be a year older, so I could move up a class a year older, a year early. I don't know, just I was like always like tall for my age and, you know, competitive. So yeah, it was sort of mad. Like it just worked that way, that if I just jumped in at the deep end, I'd learn, you know, sink or swim. So
that segues us nicely into 2018 and literally getting thrown in at the deep end of the TT. Firstly, briefly, how do you go from kind of that trajectory of going through Thundersport? There's a clear path, Thundersport, British Superbikes, and then on to wherever you can, you know, achieve World Superbikes, MotoGP, whatever it might be. But you went there and then almost took a right turn and went, I'm going road racing.
Yeah, well, it's a bit of a long story, but
did you have the same mentality of just jumping in at the deep end?
A little bit. It wasn't really like in my thoughts. It had not crossed my mind. Obviously, TT was this really cool thing, but it was a different path, and what I was moving towards, like you say, was moving towards BSB. And right now I've done one Thundersport. We'll go to 600 at BSB and go race Super Stock 600 at BSB then, which we did the next year. And the same thing, you get told, look, if you're good enough, you might score a couple of points in your first season. And my second round I won in Stock 600, and then went from there. Had a lot of mechanicals. This stage was the one where you realise you can't really go any further with what we had as like a family. At this point, my younger brother was mechanicking for me. He's old enough now, so I don't know if I get into trouble for saying it, but he was mechanicking for me at the time. My brother was 12 years old. And you know, you weren't allowed on pit lane at BSB under 16.
Yeah.
And he was on the grid. Mechanic. He was my main mechanic, genuinely, like my crew chief, you know, and he was 12 years old. And my granddad, my granddad was always there. My granddad, like 65, 70 years old at the time. And my granddad's a joiner. You know, he's no mechanical background at all. He, you know, was there to do what he
a proper family
could,
team.
and my dad would be there when he could, and which wasn't often because again he was working all the time to try and put as much funding in as he could. So he'd miss a lot of the racing himself because he was working. So we did what we could in that sense. I had another a really good guy who'd then come with me from Supermoto, Chris Cox, and he was, you know, not like an all-inspection technician, but I'd worked with him for so many years. He was really good, and I still think he's really good now, to be honest. And I owe a lot to him for the support he gave me. I had him set my bike up, and people would be like, "Oh, the all-ins guy" or whatever, and it's like we can't afford that, you know. But Chris, honestly, was so good, and you know, we were successful doing it, but we had a few incidences in that year in BSB. You know, my sump plug fell out, and
that's because you got a 12-year-old tying it up.
12-year-old, and you know, you come in and I'm raging and like obviously really mad, and I think my mum was there and my granddad, and he's like, "You can't go mad at him. He's 12 years old. Like, what do you expect?" And it's like, well, yeah, what can we do? Like, that's, you know, that's honestly the best we had. And finished sixth in the championship, won 2 races, podium in another one, and from then on, you think you had a lot of interest. That after that year, thought it's all right. You know, we need to move on from the steps that I'm at, but I had a lot of interest off manufacturers then. Kawasaki were knocking on the door, and you think, this is my career. Spawn would be all right. And then you go for meetings with a team and they're like, "Yeah, please come and ride for us." And you're like, "Oh, just sorted. There's loads of teams want me to ride for them."
Yeah.
You go for a meeting and they're like, yeah, this is the bike, this is the setup, this is the team. And you're like, "This is amazing. Yeah, I love it." And they're like, "The last thing, you just have to bring 60 grand and we're good to go." And I was like, "What?
Sorry, what?"
What do you mean? And they're like, "Oh, well, you know, with all the teams, you got to bring money." And it's like, I don't have 60 grand. I don't have half of that. Nowhere near. Like, I don't know what I'm meant to do now. And to be honest, wanted to move onto a big bike. I wanted to move on to 1,000. I couldn't. Got some support of Kawasaki anyway to get a ride. We still had to pay 20 grand, I think, to a team. So I worked flat out all winter. At this time, I'd moved away from home to work for a company, Continental. Lived in Birmingham, like saving up as much money as I could. I ended up having to actually, just before the season, I had to quit my job because they were like, "You can't have any more Fridays off," because I was obviously a bunch of Fridays off to go racing. And they're like, "That's it, no more Fridays. Your work's more important than your hobby of racing." And I'm like, "Nah, racing, I'm going to do this." So literally went from there, and I had to quit my job, saved up enough, got enough sponsorship in to just scrape together this 20 grand to pay for my ride for the season. And don't know whether I'm savage enough, but a lot of people know them like a team that have, to be honest, screwed a lot of people in the paddock on numerous occasions. And anyway, they turned up at round one. They said my mechanic hadn't turned up. The bike wasn't properly built. I'd tested it one evening before round one and turned up at round one and said, yeah, your mechanic's not turned up. I later found out they'd actually not give him a pass to get in and wouldn't give him a pass to get in. So he'd left. So I had no mechanic, and they're like, it's not our problem, sort yourself out. There's your bike. And
Brilliant.
It was like, what do I do now? And fortunately, my dad was home at this point. I called him up and said, you come help me put my tyre warmers on, maybe change some tyres or whatever. And this is a BSB level, you know, how you compete with that. And round one, stood on the podium, still led the full race, ended up third. And I thought, this is going to change their mind, you know, they'll realise that it's worth helping me now. And that couldn't have been any further from it. You know, they had no interest in running that. And they just, I think, wanted to take the 20 grand, and they were more interested in the other riders that they were running. And they literally give me a call before round two and said, we're leaving the workshop in 20 minutes and there's no space in the truck for your bike. If you're not here to pick the bike up in those 20 minutes, it gets locked in the workshop and you can't race, obviously, because it'd be locked in, and, you know, it's your responsibility to get your bike there. And it wasn't. That just wasn't
crazy.
The deal. They basically just did everything they could, and ended up getting somebody to pick it up. And, you know, I had a whole thing down there. I had to set the bike up in a friend's awning, and then they come up and took the bike and took it into their garage and said, it's our bike, it has to go in our garage. And then they completely mess suspension up, which is like, it's crazy to even think about, because it's just dangerous, you know, like, and they change everything to, you know, just make it terrible. I went out and rode it and called my dad up, who was away working again, and said, look, they just don't want me here. What's the point? You know, it's dangerous. I'm way down the order. What's the point in being here? And he said, you know, just do the right thing. You know, what do you think the right thing is to do? And I said, the right thing isn't to be here anymore.
Yeah.
So I like quit and tried to get money back. They wouldn't give us the money back, even though we'd done 1.5 rounds. Wouldn't give us the money back, and that was it. I had no job. I had no money then, like literally nothing. Like, I was still living at home with my parents.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't have anything. So I was like, what am I going to do now? And you speak to some other teams and they're like, yeah, if you can bring some money, we'll run you. And I didn't have any. So I thought, this is the point where you're like,
game over.
A lot of people, like, you know, I go get a job and forget about racing bikes. And so it's like, mess around for like a few months. I say mess around, just tried to go to meetings. I ended up getting a job selling insurance to racers so they could send me to race circuits. So I thought I'd maybe network and meet somebody who's going to help me. So I was selling insurance, did that for a few months, and ended up getting a call off a guy, Harry Corbett, who said, I don't know if you've ever thought about it, but do you want to come and do a road race? And I'm like, never even thought.
Wasn't
about it,
on your radar.
To be honest, I'd not thought about it. It's just not even come into my mind. And certainly my parents purposely steered me away from it. They made a point of being like, you're not doing that. Like, it's dangerous road race, and we don't want you to go down that road. And I said, that's the only opportunity I've got. I'll take it. But he said, he was pretty good. He said, if you come and you don't feel comfortable doing it, don't do it. Like, only do it if you want to do it. Don't do it for any other reason. And I went anyway, and it's a pretty crazy one to do as my first one, but it was Skerry's Irish National Road Race, and probably one of the narrowest.
I've seen it on film. I've never been daft enough to race it.
Yeah, honestly, the back road up there is like it's like a footpath. Honestly, if you drove down there in a car, the wheels on both sides of the car would touch the grass verges on either side. Like, it's that wide.
Oh, that narrow.
And was that a massive, obviously, shock to the system? What was your feeling after your first?
So yeah, obviously a bit apprehensive as I drove around. Or the guy who took me over there, because I couldn't even afford a ferry. They were like, "We'll get your ferry out here. It won't cost you anything. Just come and ride." So he drove me around in the car, and I'm like, "Oh my God, this is the track." As you drive down this back, they're like, "Oh yeah." You're like, it doesn't look like a track, and there's a hairpin at the end that you'd have to like 3-point turn to get around in a car. Like, it's so tight, and yeah, it's a bit of an eye opener. But I thought, just go out, just take it easy, and like just don't do anything silly. It's dangerous, not take any risks, and rode round anyway, and honestly loved it. Just got the bug instantly. Came in, massive smile on my face. I was like, this is awesome. Like, it gave me a different sort of buzz to circuit racing. Like, not that I didn't love that. Like, I love any form of racing. Like, as I've sort of said, like any form of motorsport, like I love doing. But it was a totally different thing. Like, it gave me a bigger buzz than I'd ever experienced in my life before. Like, it was insane. So literally, I was hooked from that point. Did a few more Irish national races with Harry, and had a few decent results at them. Like, didn't expect to. He didn't have any budget at all to go along with it. He did what he could. We were using people's second-hand tyres and stuff like that. The bike was roughly like sort of cobbled together, and probably never seen an oil change, and a couple of decent results, and that's what got me the start with John Burrows for the next year. It obviously caught his eye enough to give me an opportunity or to get into talks. And
from that first race at Skerry's, how quickly did the Isle of Man TT become part of your radar?
So basically, immediately then, as soon as I realised I love Skerry's, then in my mind is like, where do we go? Because I never wanted to be, at any point in my career, never wanted to be like still. I never wanted to just stay where I am. It was never a thing for me to be like, keep doing what I'm doing. It was always go further. Where can I go? Where's the top? I want to go there. I want to be at the front and there, like the hardest class. Put me in that one. So
you look towards like the senior.
So straight away,
you're
like,
that was it.
The Isle of Man TT. It's a road race. This is a road race. That's the biggest one. Start thinking about. So I started watching videos from then, and not long after, I think it was really shortly after, was the TT that year, and ended up speaking to a couple of friends. Actually, I lie. It was before Skerry's. I ended up going there before Skerry's to the TT while I was still working for the insurance company.
As a spectator? Yeah.
As a worker selling insurance is what I told them. I said if they pay for my flight to the Isle of Man TT, it'd be full of bike people. I sell so much insurance. And in my mind thinking, I'm going to meet a team out there.
Yeah. Hustler.
Brilliant. And
full-on hustler.
Worked it out, and went and slept in the back of somebody's truck for 2 weeks at the TT. And yeah, I genuinely stood at the top of Bray Hill just after St Inian's Crossroads for the first time ever watching the TT.
What a place.
Watched the bikes come by there in one of the practice sessions, and honestly, it was like, this is absolutely insane. I've never seen anything like it in my life. This is exactly what I want to do. This looks nuts, and it looks unreal. I never got like a rush like that from spectating. I hate spectating anything. I always want to do it. It doesn't matter what I'm doing. I'd rather be the one on the other side of the fence. But the TT, I was like, wow, like what a rush you get even as a spectator, because you can be so close. There's nowhere else you can be that close to the action, and never mind like bikes coming by at 200 mile an hour doing a jump or something like that, and walls either side. So that was, and you can literally feel in the ground the bike come in, and then hear it for miles into the distance, like still flat out, you know. So it was a great like feeling I got from that just for spectating. So that's part of what like made me think, this is where I want to come. I want to race the TT, and ended up getting in touch. I think Paul Phillips actually called me one day and said,
"We need you, Davey. You're the saviour of the TT."
After maybe doing Skerries and Walderstown the first couple of racing, he said, I know you were at the TT earlier this year. You obviously thinking about doing the TT, and I'm like, yeah, absolutely. Like, and he said, obviously the usual progression is that you go to the Manx Grand Prix before, but we can make it happen to come straight to the TT if you want to do that, and we'll do all we can to help you do that. And genuinely, they did. They were absolutely awesome. The whole TT team, like, give you all support to learn the circuit, for getting out there, getting put up in a hotel for a couple of days, getting round in laps with Milky Quail, with Johnny Barton, with a bunch of like experienced guys to do laps of the TT course with, to teach you it as best they possibly can. And that was the main goal for me, just to learn it, so I knew every inch of it. I wasn't thinking about how fast I was going to go. I just go there and be safe and learn it. As long as I'm comfortable that I know exactly every inch of the course, that I know it really well, I'll feel happy to go there. And they made that possible for me.
So that was 2018. You ended up being the second fastest newcomer, blitzing it. Absolutely smashed it to pieces. You went back in 19. How well did you know the track when you went back there? Like, so what I'm thinking about is, as a newcomer, how physically demanding is it to race a 6-lap senior TT? Like, you've got the likes of Rutter, McGuinness, these riders who are so experienced, who do very, I say this with all due respect, do very little physical training. But I know you, and I know you train pretty hard. What is it like for someone who's new to it still, relatively fresh? Is it physically, is it mentally demanding? Are you getting off that bike at the end like, oh my God, that like absolutely shattered?
Yeah, in all honesty, I don't think you ever come off a bike more drained than a 6-lap senior, to be honest. Yeah. But to be honest, more than the physical side of it, mentally draining. You're never mentally as drained in your entire life as when you get off after them 6 laps. There's no possible way you can tell me in any other sport in the world you have to focus that hard for that long, because you can't blink, you can't like let your mind wander off while you're doing 200 mile an hour with zero room for error. Like, it's not beating it around the bush. You crash, you got a good chance of dying. Like, there's no room for error around this place, and so it's full on like 110% concentration for nearly 2 hours.
But here's the thing, like you mentioned at the start, how the moment the flag drops and you get the tap on the shoulder, the nerves go, and you go. It's almost like you go into autopilot when you're thinking. What are you actually thinking, or is your brain just that focused on what it's doing that you're not even? Do you know what I mean? Like, you're not even actually thinking about what you're doing. You're just doing it, but it is so taxing on your brain because it's kind of working on in the background, doing what it's supposed to do to make sure that you get to the end in one piece. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of that. There's definitely a lot that you start doing in autopilot after a lot of like practice laps and stuff like that. But right through practice, it's you're piecing together like corner by corner. I would like almost talk myself through corner by corner, be like, right, I need to be here. This is coming up. Like, the corners ahead, like, be this place in the road, brake here, like this gear, just rehearsing, because it's you go onto autopilot around a circuit for sure, right? Around Donington Park,
just for some of the listeners and probably not quite experienced of maybe riding on circuit, or especially 37.7 miles of the Isle of Man TT course. You mean reference points from that tipping in marker, from that apex to that exit point, and so on.
Yeah, completely. It was. I had a massive list from when I was learning before the race. A massive list of reference points in my phone that I used as reference points when I was driving around in the car trying to learn the course and stuff. Going right when I see that wall or something, or when I see that line or curb or something, that's where I know I need to tip in, and this is the corner. And it's hard to explain, but as a rider, Steve, like riding around there, you use these markers, you start to use them subconsciously, but you still use them, and it's sometimes a really odd situation. Like you said, from 18 to 19, you go back and you need to make sure you've rehearsed that course, because a lot's changed. It's still a real world scenario. It's not a circuit where there's nothing but gravel traps and grass around the course. Somebody might have had an extension built on the house and it looks different, so it doesn't catch your eye the same, or houses get knocked down, trees get cut down, walls get knocked down or rebuilt, and they look different. There's changes that you like that are different then, that you might use as a reference point going around.
So are you talking to yourself to a certain degree all the way around the 37.7 miles from this point to that point to this point to that point?
Near enough, definitely in the first year. I was like that, like less so. In the second year, I felt like I didn't have to do that as much. I'm probably still doing it subconsciously. It's just that much rehearsal and that many laps I've watched, that many laps I've done on the game. The game was a massive part of it for me, playing the PlayStation game. Like I did hundreds of hours on the game, like insane amount, to the point I didn't have a PlayStation, so I'm not a good gamer. I'd never done that like my whole life. As a kid, it was like, look, for Christmas, like, I know you want a PlayStation, but we've been paying for your bike racing all year.
Yeah, you're not having a PlayStation.
And I'm like, I want a bike and not a PlayStation.
Who did you look up to the most and use their onboards and to do your swatting?
I used a lot of different onboards, to be honest. A lot of people obviously look towards like a McGuinness onboard or something, but it's so fast. Like, it's hard to learn that. As like a newcomer, there's no point watching a 132 mile an hour lap. Like, it's not going to be going that quick. So I end up watching like classic bike laps and stuff, and weirdly enough, actually a McGuinness lap on a pattern I watched a lot, on an old pattern classic 500. So it was a much slower speed, and it was easier to learn at that speed, and once you got comfortable learning at that speed, then it moved up. But it got to a stage for me, your mind could wander off watching an onboard, and driving around in the car, you were going too slow for it to be urgent enough to know where you're going. You had too long to think about it.
To get to the next point.
Where am I going again? Okay, is this right? It was too long. So, but playing the game, it made you better with that. Like, to the point I played it that much, it was second fastest in the world just before my first TT. The game
that's
leaderboard.
All right. That's not bad.
And I was doing like 150 something mile an hour laps. Like, it was just so then you actually learn at definitely a quicker speed than you would actually be doing.
Yeah.
So I felt like it trained you enough that when you're out there riding, it was like, I know exactly where I'm going. And hats off to the guys making the game. They did an insane job at creating that course to a T. I was involved in the development of the second TT game that then later came out, and they let me in on how they like laser scan the whole course and everything. So it's like every bump, every undulation is in the game. Like, it's obviously the characteristics. It's not like actually riding a bike, but in reference terms of the course and learning the course, it's the same.
So how did your first experience of getting on the track and getting your head down for the first practice night compare to that game? Did you feel like you were, I know where I'm going here?
The first lap was horrendous. After that was fine, but the the first lap, there was three newcomers
Right.
to the course that year, and as your first lap, the newcomers go off first.
And you're normally behind a support, as in Milky Quail, or
Yeah, Milky set off first, and then it was Adam Lyon, and one of the other newcomers, David Jackson, and myself at the back, and he put us in that order. Said, "Don't pass, just follow each other. Like I'll go quick. There's no point me going crawling around at snail's pace because you're gonna then go out in your next lap want to go quicker, and it's not help."
Yeah.
So he's good. He's really good, Milky, and it's like a TT winner himself. He sort of knows his way around.
Yeah, a little bit.
So he took us around anywhere with not even, I think, 5 miles in or something like that, and I'm like, my visor's absolutely covered in, I don't know what, it's just covered. It was like blurry, and I'm like, can't see. Fortunately, bunch of tear offs on, 3 tear offs, pull the tear off. 2 minutes later, not even, maybe a minute later, absolutely covered again. And I don't mean like a couple of bugs, I mean like to the point where you're like, I can't see. So I pulled another one, and then this on the like last thing, and then it's like covered again. And this is when I realised the bike in front, David Jackson's bike that he's riding, is like spraying out oil from behind it. It's leaking oil. And it's oil, and because then I realised it all over my screen on the front of the bike, my arms and stuff. It's a lot of oil. Like,
this is your first lap at the TT.
My first lap around the TT, and then you're like, the main thing is don't fall off around the TT.
Yeah.
And now I'm covered in oil, and now like everything's then stuff goes into your head, like doubt and fear of crashing as a racer never comes into your head. Everybody's asked, are you worried about crashing? If you were worried about crashing, you wouldn't do it. And I can see that from that lap right there. But then I'm like, he doesn't know. He's still riding round. And then it panicked me to the point where I'm like, I was almost more worried about him, because I was like, he doesn't know his bike's spewing out oil. It's going to get on his back tyre, or it's going to lock up or something. And we're like still doing 160 mile an hour. Might not be flat through places or flat out, but still full gas
Fast
down
enough.
a straight that's 160, 180 mile an hour on big bikes. We're all on 1000cc bikes. I'm like, I've got to get up by the side of him to tell him to pull off, to get off the thing. But I'm trying to drop back to get out the oil. And then I'm like, oh no, I need to catch him up. But as soon as I catch him up, there's getting more oil sprayed, and I didn't know what to do. I was like so scared, and this all happened over the course of a couple of miles. I was like, if I need to make this happen before something happens. Got up by the side of him, waved him down, and he realised straight away and then pulled off. But then I'm still nervous about the oil all over my bike, if it's on my front tyre or something. And Milky and Adam kept pulling away, and he's not going that quick, but like probably doing 110 mile an hour lap, I think we did. But like he's pulling away from me, and then realising that he's lost me, and then having to slow down. I bet they're both thinking, what's wrong with him?
What's he doing? Yeah.
Like going so slow, and I'm just thinking, crawl around this lap. I need to pull in, get me off this track. And again, like, massive respect to John Burrows. You pull into the pits, and all the other riders then have set off for their first night of practice, and you fill up with fuel and you can go straight back out. So I pull in, and I'm like, there's oil all over my bike. You got to clean it. Like my head's completely falling off, at this stage. First lap of the TT, the scariest, most dangerous track in the world. And
you're doing it covered in oil.
I'm terrified now. So he cleaned it all up, cleaned all the bike. He said, don't just fill the bike. You're going back out. And he said, I don't want to hit, it's all clean. Don't worry about it. It's clean. It's fully clean. I promise you. Go back out now. 2 laps. Don't pull in after your first lap. I don't care what you think. Do 2 laps and then come in. And then, went out. Just relaxed then for that next lap. And then, by the time I'd come across the start and finish for my second lap, I may as well have been like...
That was it.
scream with happiness. You know, it was like, this is mint. I know exactly where I'm going. Oh.
While you're on that note of probably the negative side, you mentioned about you can't afford to crash. Obviously, it's the most dangerous circuit in the world. You know, you've already only a couple of years in, you've kind of experienced the negative side, the darker side of the TT course, how dangerous it is, and so on. We had McGuinness in, I think, 3 or 4 weeks ago, and he was talking about, of course, his big mate DJ that was obviously ended his life at Crosby. You know, another northeast lad, Daley Matheson, unfortunately had a big crash in 2019 and unfortunately didn't survive. How does that affect you riding around a TT course?
That was tough, honestly, to experience that. I'd experienced it in another manner. I grew up with Malachi Mitchell-Thomas my whole life. Again, like, we come through exactly the same path. Like, we raced together from 6 years old, and we battled against each other at Motocross, then at Supermoto, BSB, and then onto the roads. And Malachi ended up crashing and dying at the Northwest 200. And that was hard. That's what made it super hard. I think more on my family than me, because they knew Mal's dad and Mal's family, and they seen how awful that is, let's say. But as a rider's perspective, you got to move on from that. You got to keep going. You understand as a rider what they were thinking as a rider, and being like such good friends with Daley. Like, Daley was my best mate. He was my teammate. Everything, we trained together. We were all at the same races because we were then riding for the same team. We were riding IRC together, trained together, travelled together, like everything. Like, more apart, like never apart. You know, it was so then to be so close together on speed as well. We were 18 and 19 on the road, like seeded number 18 and number 19. So we set off 10 seconds apart. We talked so much rubbish together, about who's going to be better and stuff like that. But also at the same time, we had sat down and spoke about, what ifs and stuff like that. Because you get into it, and we both know the risk, what we're doing here, and both as, honestly, hand on heart, sit there and go, we do it no matter what. We know the risk, we know what can happen, and you still do it because it's the best thing ever. There's nothing that compares to it, and it's worth doing.
Yeah.
With the small chance of risk that there is. You always feel like as a rider you can, I'm not going to ride to that extent, it's not going to be me, sort of thing. But we spoke about it and said we'd do it no matter what, because it's the best thing. It's what we live for. It's what we've, strived our life to do, race bikes. And after experiencing racing the Isle of Man TT, it's the best feeling that you will ever get. Like, bar nothing. Like, I can't honestly say that anything compares to racing that. So no matter what, we were going to do it. And it was really tough losing Daley, to be honest.
Did you think about stopping? Even though you've had that conversation, you said it's the best thing in the world. Did that thought go through your head?
For a time, shortly, I don't know, you come in, you don't really know what to think. It's your head's a bit all over the place, and to be honest, it was for a long time after, certainly for the rest of the duration of the TT in 2019, because it was in the first race and we still had a bunch more races. The team and everybody come up and said, we understand. I think we possibly had a race that afternoon, or maybe a practice session that afternoon after the first race, after that had happened. And you think, and they're like, we understand if you don't want to do it anymore, and if you want to sit it out or sit out tonight or whatever. And to be honest, for me, it was the only time I had where I didn't think about it, because of how much focus and concentration it requires to ride around that place. It was the only time my head wasn't all over because it was on the TT course.
Yeah.
You know, I'd come in, it was tough, you know, going through everything, and I was gutted to lose daily. But, you know, by racing, being out on track and out on the bike, you know, I wasn't thinking about it then. And that gave me, you know, a bit of time to clear my head with that. So that's why I carried on. And, you know, honestly, daily wouldn't want anybody to stop. You know, same for any rider. We all know what we're doing out there, and you know, I know if anything happened to me, you know, like I wouldn't be going, oh, I don't want anybody to stop. You know, don't racing. I'm doing exactly what I love doing. I'm doing the best thing in the world to me. You know, I wouldn't have any other way. Like I absolutely love it. So there is no stopping for me, certainly.
So let's look to the future now then. You are tipped as one of the hottest properties in road racing. It's fact, right? Whether you like it or not. Do you feel that pressure? Or, because to me you seem like a guy that just enjoys racing, regardless of whether there's any pressure on you or not, whether people think that you're going to go on to win, you know, whatever it might be in the future. Do you feel the pressure?
Yeah, no, I wouldn't say so. Like, the pressure's the same as the pressure I've always put on myself. Like, nobody's ever put more pressure on me than I put on myself, because I've always wanted more. I never want to just settle again with whatever I'm doing. I want to be better, so I'm always never happy. And I think a lot of racers are the same. You're never happy with what you do, so you always want to be better, and that's just what I want to keep doing. And after the first 2 years at the TT, honestly, like, I was absolutely gobsmacked. I was shocked when I come in and the team told me I'd done 130 mile an hour lap in the senior. You know, we had a tough week with daily. We'd had no practice laps. It'd been crazy weather-wise. You know, I just sort of wrote it off. I thought it'd be nice to do a 130, but you know, it's probably not going to happen. So I didn't think about it. I never strived to do a lap time. I never aimed for a lap time. I just went out and rode as good as I could ride and see where I end up, without, you know, pushing or anything, or what I feel like is pushing. Made sure I rode well within myself everywhere. Left loads of room at the side of the road. You know, not running up on curbs or anything like that. So for me, coming in and them being like, you've done 130 mile an hour lap in that race there, and I'm like, that's insane. Like, I didn't feel like it. It just, again, I always translate it back. It felt like a Sunday ride to me. Yeah. Like, I just feel like I was just riding. Yeah. And then we rolled on into the pits, and one of the other mechanics came running over, and he thought he was running over to, you know, say well done on the 130, and he come up and he was like, you pleased with that? And I was like, yeah, 130. And he was like, no, last lap you did 131.5. And I'm like, I can't even, I couldn't believe the 130, never mind that. And yeah, it was just insane. So for me, moving forward to better that, I don't feel like it would take a lot, because I don't want to say too much, because I'm not like egging myself on to be this or be that or the other. I just want to go out there and ride, but I feel well within myself then to do 131.5. So I've definitely got some more in me than that, you know.
You know, we're well into 2022 now. You've got to be focusing very hard on the Isle of Man TT. What would, you know, when you leave there and you finish TT22, what would you really have to come away with? Whether it be a lap time, a podium, a win, what would that really be? What would be the little cherry on top of the cake for Davey Todd?
I try not to set any goals, to be honest. It's a race like no other, because in the sense of every other race I've done in my life, if I come away second place, I'm not happy, you know. But the TT, you come away and you've just come across the finish line and done a lap time that was better than last time, and you're like absolutely peaking. Just, you're also amped up from riding round there that it is just the best thing. So you're just excited to ride round there.
Yeah.
And to be able to do that. But like, I don't know, moving forward, I just want to keep getting better, and we're not far away with everything how it's been so far, as I say. So we're not streets away from things like podiums, and who knows?
You don't have to leave without an answer.
It's a weird thing. It's going to be a weird year, isn't it? 2 years out, and then going back into it. I can't make my mind up whether that's going to benefit me or hurt me.
I've had this conversation with Gary Thompson, obviously the clerk of the course, and people especially like yourself that have only really had 2 big years experience, and probably in my mind, you're not going to forget where you're going, but everybody needs to polish up, of course, and be very careful and step into it nicely. And that's hopefully if we get good weather for practice week.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's exactly how it's going to be, and it's going to be a weird situation for everyone, I'm sure, having these couple of years out, and then who knows, going back to it, what it's going to be like. My situation, I suppose, to be honest, doesn't feel like it's changed a whole lot, because I just felt like a newcomer anyway, and I still sort of feel like a newcomer. I'm still going to be, but it's sort of going to now set everybody back. Guys like Rutter and McGuinness and stuff like that, they're that well rehearsed around that place. I'm sure that they haven't forgot after the amount of laps that they've done around there. But,
do you know what? Obviously, we've had Hickey and McGuinness in already here. Be fabulous, Chris, wasn't it? And I don't know whether you've listened, but they both said pretty much they're very confident. After the first couple of nights, everybody's going to be bang back on the 30, 31s, 32s, and getting back on the pace very quickly.
Yeah, I think the level is just coming up the whole time. With the TT, the lap times coming up. What Hickey and Dean have been doing, it's insane, and the speed's coming up because technology's getting better, bikes are getting better, but also people are realising that road racing isn't what it maybe used to be, let's say, where you could ride around well within yourself and not need to be at the level of BSB, but all the top guys at the TT are now racing BSB week in, week out, even with guys like Michael Dunlop, and who'd have guessed that'd ever happen? But he's there racing every week because he knows that's what you got to be doing now, to find those limits, to then go at the TT and know where your ceiling is, sort of thing. So I think the speed will still be strong for sure, but I think that I'll be in a better position than I'll ever have been in before as well, for more experience. Riding on short circuits, because the first 2 years I'd only rode a big bike on a road race until 2020. I had not rode a big bike on a short circuit, so I'd only solely rode them on roads, which is a weird thing to learn a big bike on a road. But I think we'll just keep plugging away, and it'd be nice to be stood on that podium. We got one at the Classic TT on the 250, and that bike probably scares me more than a 200 plus breakout superbike.
We wish you all the best with that, and we're looking at you obviously as being one of the future big names without doubt. Right, I've got some quick fire questions for you. Okay, we're just going to ping through these quickly. Now you can only give me one answer or the other. 2 answers for each question. There's no reasoning and no description. Right, beer or wine?
Wine.
Left or right?
Left.
Pineapple or never pineapple on pizza?
Never pineapple.
Super Sport or Super Twin?
Super Sport.
Mass start or time trial?
Mass start.
A pillion ride with John McGuinness or Pete Hickman?
McGuinness.
I knew you'd say that. Win a British Championship or a senior TT win?
Senior TT.
Slicks or treaded tyres?
Slicks.
Right, the TT course. Sector 1, the Grandstand to Glen Helen, or Sector 4, Ramsey hairpin to Cronknamona?
Yeah, over the mountain. Ramsey to Cronknamona.
Sector 4. Hey, thanks, buddy. I've enjoyed the chat.
Absolute pleasure, Davey. We've got to get him on for another one. We've still got so much ground to cover, and I think the next time we get him on this podcast, we might be talking to a TT winner.
Let's hope so.
No pressure then.
Cheers. Cheers, mate.
Cheers.
Thanks, buddy. Hey, Steve, Davey Todd. I mean, again, I don't want to blow smoke up his bottom, but I genuinely see that guy as a TT winner at some point.
Hey, impressive in all fairness. I learned quite a lot there about the boy, you know, and he's done quite a lot of stuff already and been fast instantly. But yeah, certainly a bright light of the future. He just needs the right team and the right people around him to bring those qualities out.
Do you think he can get his first maiden win?
I do. He's already been there at the Northwest 200. He's done it there, and there's no reason at all over the next 2 or 3 years why he can't do it at the TT.
Maybe this is the man to push Peter Hickman and put him under pressure.
Hey, let's hope so.
This has been episode 4 of the TT podcast. If you've enjoyed it, then hit that subscribe button and leave us a rating and a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. We have plenty more star-studded names from the world of the TT on the way in this series. And here's a little taste of what you can expect from our next guest.
They did a couple of vertebrae, tailbone, my jaw maybe, and my brain was bleeding. So
That answers a lot of questions.
all honesty, I was probably too intelligent before, so it sort of leveled that out for me.
That next episode will be out in 2 weeks' time, and don't forget you can get all the latest TT news and features over at iomttracers.com. And be sure to check us out on all the usual socials. We are at TT Racers Official. Thanks for listening.